Good afternoon. Hope you're having a great day, and I hope you had an awesome Purim. So today, we lost a remarkable Jew, Chaim Topol, 87 years old, of blessed memory in Israel. A passionate Jew, a proud Israeli, who most famously was known for his part as playing Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof. And who can forget Tevye and Fiddler on the Roof? Tradition, tradition. And we all remember all the little perfections of how he did it. In fact, he started as a young man at 30 years old, but he ended up playing the part 3,500 times. And when he was young and he began, he had to use makeup to make himself look older. And then at his last tour, when he came to America, he was already 75 years old. And then he had to use his youthful energy to stay young and to look younger. And on his last tour, he ended up being in Orlando during the high holiday times. My friend, my colleague, who's the Chabad rabbi there, told me that he was in touch with him about his high holiday needs. He was a traditional man, and he wanted to make sure he had his high holiday needs. And he remarked him something interesting. He said to him that, when I'm going around now on my tour, which is 45 years later than I first started, I find many more people crying at Fiddler on the Roof than they did early on. And they spoke about the idea that possibly it was that in the early years when he started, people were trying to assimilate and run away from their Judaism and from their tradition. So they just used it as a humorous thing, and it was funny, and they liked it. But now, many people that are watching it and might have assimilated a little bit, or might have left or been distanced from their Judaism, are crying more because they're missing that tradition. They're missing that Yiddishkeit, that holiness that they had, that their parents had, that their grandparents had, that they remember. And when they watch Tevye on Fiddler on the Roof, it reminds them of what they're missing. Interestingly enough, connecting it to this week's Torah portion, in this week's Torah portion, we read about the counting the census of God commanding the Jewish people to be counted by the coins, the contributions they gave towards the temple. And always to remind us that as Jews, you're counted by what you give. But the word the Torah uses is kitisa, when you lift up the heads. Not when you count, but kitisa. And the question is, why does the Torah use the word kitisa to lift up? And the simple explanation given is because usually many times when you count something, you devalue it. You're just a number. You're part of something much greater, but you don't have your intrinsic personal value. And what the Torah is telling us is that even though you're counting them, make sure to lift them up, not to devalue them, but to value them. I've told you many times a story with this father and his son they're walking together on the ocean, and the kid is taking starfish and he's throwing it back in, and there's so many starfish being washed onto the shore, and he keeps on throwing them back in. And the father says to the kid, "What are you doing?" He says, "I want to make sure they live." He says, "Yeah, but there's millions of starfish. What difference does it make?" And as the kid's picking up a starfish and throwing it in, he says to his father, to this starfish, it makes all the difference in the world. And basically, the message is that kitisa, you have to lift up, because only through lifting people could they really be counted. But then there's a deeper message. The rabbis tell us kitisa means to lift. You take the word rosh, that means the head. The Torah tells us you lift the heads of the Jewish people, and you lift it up each one. That means you take their letter in the alphabet and you lift it up one. The resh becomes a shin, and the aleph becomes a beit, and the shin becomes a taf. It spells out the word Shabbat. You lift it up one more in the alphabet. And what the Torah is telling us, if you want to lift the Jewish people, if you want to inspire them, it's through Shabbat. It's through that one day a week when you stop what you're doing and you focus inward on your family, on your community, on God, on your spirituality. It's one of the greatest gifts we have. And maybe, just maybe, when we're yearning for the days of yore, when people watch Tevye and Fiddler on the Roof and they're missing their past that they might have thrown away or ran away from. What they're forgetting is the gift of Shabbos, the gift of spirituality, the gift of that 7th day that lifts us up and allows us to be who you are. You know, some people always tell me, Rabbi, how could you tell me not to work on Shabbos? I make so much money on Shabbos. I earn money. I need to work. And one of the great sages gives an analogy. Imagine if you had a barrel and it had 6 spigots in it and you're getting your wine out. And then you say, no, wait, I want to get more wine out. Maybe I'm going to make a 7th spigot. And the truth is, if you make it into 7, you're still going to get the same amount of wine. It might come out quicker, but you're still going to get the same amount of wine. And the message, they say, is that ultimately, you might think you have to work an extra day, you can earn more. But there's a certain amount allotted to you from God. And when you recognize that, and you put the value in Shabbos, and you lift up the Jewish people, and maybe, just maybe, that's what we're missing more than everything else when we commemorate a life like Chaim Topol, who reminded us of the tradition we so sorely miss. Have a great day.